Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here and welcome to another overview video. And now I'm taking a look at a limited edition Blu-ray box set that came out in 2012. And it is of one of my favourite franchises in film history, the Indiana Jones franchise, which at the time of filming this contains 4 films: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which came out in 1981, 1984, 1989 and 2008 respectively. All 4 of them star Harrison Ford as the intrepid archaeologist Indiana Jones, or Indy to his friends, and dressed in his trademark fedora hat and brown and beige outfit, reminiscent of perhaps a lion tamer, and armed with a bullwhip and a 6-shooter pistol. The first 3 films were set in the 1930s and the 4th was set in the 1950s because of it being filmed so late after Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. It allowed for the fact that Harrison Ford had aged nearly 2 decades, so they couldn't really set it in the 30s anymore. But for whatever reason, the Indiana Jones became a truly beloved character, and to think he was very nearly played by an actor called Tom Selleck, who actually put in a good screen test, and that is actually one among the multitude of bonus features on the bonus disc within this. But unfortunately, at the time, he was contracted to a television series called Magnum PI, and they wouldn't, and his contract and contractual obligations to that meant that they wouldn't allow him to play the part of Indiana Jones. So they cast Harrison Ford instead, and the rest is history. So let's have a look at this limited edition box set. I think it was limited to 3,000 copies, but I can't actually remember now, because at the time of doing this video it was 8 years ago. But as you can see, it's shaped a bit like a book, and it's got faux page edges. In reality, this is a box. And for those not in the know, those are the leftmost of those there is one of the British Board of Film Classification certificates that we use here in the UK, with the exception of documentaries and certain educational works. All DVDs, Blu-rays and now 4K Ultra HD and online has to be classified by the BBFC and given a certificate. The one on the right, I believe, is for the Republic of Ireland. For some reason, those also appear on the United Kingdom releases. They have done for several years. I don't know what that's about, but for us in the UK, the version on the left is the one we obey. We do still use those same certificates now, although as of last month they compulsory look a bit different to what they do now. But enough about that. So let's get on to the actual. And here's the inside, and there's the box containing all of the Blu-ray discs. These are region 2 discs, so they won't play outside unless you've got a multi-region player. They won't play outside of Europe, I believe. And here's this is another one of those multi-fold box cases with the discs pinned and clipped into the. There's the disc for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and some pictures underneath it. guy, what it must have been like to have been watched that film all the way back in 1981. Like in the cinema. Little did people know that they were watching a film that would become an absolute masterpiece. And nearly 40 years later, it's still considered to be an absolute classic. And here's the sequel, which came out 3 years later, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This actually marked the first time ever that an official UK release of the film was passed completely uncut. For the previous DVD and VHS releases, it was cut to avoid a 15 certificate initially. Until 1989, the UK did not have a 12 rating, so it would have been rated 15, which would have meant that no one under 15 would have been allowed into the cinema to see it, and nobody under 15 would have been legally allowed to buy or rent or even be supplied and in the case of home formats, the 12 certificate didn't come out until 1994. So anything in the interim that was rated 12 in the cinema would either be uprated to 15 or be subjected to cuts for category to get a PG. But in this case, my understanding is that even Steven Spielberg wanted it to be rated PG for all those years. So, but finally in 2012, UK viewers could finally get an officially released uncensored version of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with all of the previous cuts waived, and as a result it's now rated 12 to contain the additional footage that's not acceptable at the PG category. And here's the pictures underneath that disc. Although Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom is still an enjoyable romp, it does take a much darker tone compared to the previous film, and its portrayal of certain cultures did, from what I read about it, initially cause a bit of an outrage, but I believe the film's got a bit more praise retrospectively now that it's been removed from that backlash somewhat. But although it's still not as good as Raiders. And for 5 years after that, we got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which introduced a family element and a great moments of comedy, particularly when Indiana Jones's father Henry, played by the late Sean Connery, who at the time of recording this video had recently passed away at the age of 90. Best known for being the first on-screen actor to play James Bond in a film when he appeared in Dr. No in 1962. He actually had some pretty memorable roles in some other films, and this is one of them. Even though he was only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, the interplay between the two is just magic, and it's just so amusing. Some of the time, especially when they clash over what Indy has to do to keep everyone alive, and basically Henry disapproving of the way he deals with things. And after a big 19-year hiatus, Ford put on the fedora hat and used and picked up the bullwhip once again for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And here's the pictures underneath that disc. There were some complications. Sean Connery had since retired from acting, so he flat out refused to reprise the role of Henry that he'd played back in Last Crusade. And Denham Elliott, who played Marcus Brody in Raiders and Last Crusade, had passed away a few years after the latter came out. So both of the characters were said to have died in the intervening years. and it also contained Karen Allen reprising the role of Marion from Raiders, and it also introduced a younger character called Mutt, who's played by Shia LaBeouf, who at the time was probably best known for playing Sam Witwicky in the Michael Bay directed Transformers film a year earlier. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull does polarize a lot of people. There are some people who complain about the fact that it's got some pretty daft moments in it, and the fact that there was some pretty blatant use of CGI, despite assurances that they weren't gonna. I believe that the studio said they were going to do it all practically, and it seemed like they were going back on their word. And quite a bit of the CGI really doesn't look that great in it, so I can kind of understand why viewers weren't that impressed. But despite the fact that Ford was much older than he was in Last Crusade, there are still bits where you see him actually running in long shots, so you can see it's actually him and not a double, and you see other little moments where you even see him in one shot climbing up a whole load of crates in a warehouse scene early on in the film. So he had kept physically active in the intervening 19 years between Crystal Skull and Last Crusade, and it showed. It's just a shame that the script was a little bit muddled and didn't really work, even though they had some other heavyweight actors in it, like Jim Broadbent and Kate Blanchett and Ray Winstone and John Hurt. There are still moments in it that are enjoyable. It's not the worst film in the world. There are far worse films than that than Crystal Skull out there. It just underwhelmed people in general. But it still has. I mean, Karen Allen and Harrison Ford still have a great on-screen chemistry together, and when you see Karen Allen smile, the same magic that she displayed in the smile whenever she smiled back in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the vibrancy of her smile is still there, even though there had been a lot of years between the two films. It may end up being a film you'll watch once and then never watch again, but given the quality of everything else in this box set, I don't think it's too painful if you do end up hating the film with a passion. And then there's a whole disc full of bonus features, and they really are quite entertaining and interesting. And they contain then current interviews from key cast members who were still alive. From what I recall, there was also some archive interviews with River Phoenix, who played the teenage version of Indy at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He unfortunately died in the first half of the 1990s at the age of just 22. But people interviewed included Karen Allen and John Rhys Davies, who played Sulla in Raiders and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And there's one where it was sort of amusing and sickening in equal measures when they go into the how should we say, gastric complaints that they had while filming in Morocco for Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, even Ford himself became pretty poorly, and that in turn led to one of the most memorable and darkly amusing scenes, which I won't actually spoil for anyone who's not seen the film. Anyone who has, they're going to know exactly which bit I'm talking about. involving a certain man with a sword. But yeah, so that's and there's no pictures under that. There's just a cast and a key cast and crew list for all 4 of the films. And on the back you get some really nice artwork from each film in question. Anyone who's seen The Goonies will recognise Ke Huy Quan as the little boy Short Round, because he played the character of Data in The Goonies. And Kate Capshaw, she was late. The Temple of Doom was actually the film in which she met her future husband, Steven Spielberg. And there's King of the Crystal Skull, Karen Allen, Harrison Ford, Shia LaBeouf, Kate Blanchett. And there's the spine of the case containing all the discs. Now let's have a look at the extras. Well, this contains a film cell from in this case Raiders of the Lost Ark, a point in the Well of the Souls in which he becomes face to face with a cobra. Bear in mind, you learn early on in the film that Indiana Jones absolutely loathes and detests snakes and has a phobia of them. And that's what the back of that looks like. The menu from Pankot's Palace, which is a location in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, and you see a menu of some rather not exactly particularly appetizing dishes. So if you've seen the film, you'll probably have a bit of a chuckle at this. There's nothing on the back of that. That's just a receipt. I wouldn't. And here's some behind the scenes postcards. And in this little packet, bit of photo based on events in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And some flight coupons for the Zeppelin, which featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And here we have here's the American Airways system, Henry Jones Jr. Again, that's something to do with events that happened in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Well, I believe it was actually San Francisco, Kathmandu, maybe. I'm not sure. I may have got that wrong. If I have, then I apologise. I just realised that Henry Jones Jr. is actually Indy. And the last thing in... Oh no, there's more in this bag. And here's a copy of the Grail tablet rubbing and and from the second marker from the catacombs in the library in Venice. And this plays a key. This is based on something that happens in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That one I am certain of. And here we have a picture that you briefly see in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with Indy and his dad. And the last thing in this bag, I believe this time, is a matchbook from Club Obi-Wan with a mention of Anything Goes, which was the song that Kate Capshaw's character Willie Scott sings in joint Mandarin, Chinese and English at during the opening credits of that film. And Club Obi-Wan is obviously an in-joke, because Obi-Wan Kenobi is a character from the Star Wars universe. But then, of course, you already knew that. And the last thing in this box set is this replica of Indy's dad's Grail diary. And... oh, it's the wrong way up, sorry. There's some blank pages and other bits which are based on events that happened in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This diary is a bit of a MacGuffin in that film, so it is really good seeing this replicated in all its faded yellow paged glory. And in some ways, I think this might actually be my favourite additional bit in this limited edition box set. So yeah, I was really glad I managed to get this. It originally retailed for £59.99 when I got it, and in recent times, when this particular limited edition box set went out of print, I've seen places sell it for well over 200 GBP. So I'm really glad I got it when I did, especially as I had a voucher that enabled me to knock £40 off its original price to get it down to £19.99. So I did really quite well that day, or 8 years ago. So anyway, that's an overview of the limited edition Blu-ray box set of all 4 of the Indiana Jones films. I hope you enjoyed having a look at this video with me and these extra bits and bobs. Catch you on another video soon. Taxi88 out.